The Louisiana legislature, from its budget surplus, is sharing some of that extra cash to fix roads and bridges. Lawmakers earmarked more than $1 billion to amplify $6 billion in federal dollars coming to the state from the bipartisan infrastructure law. I sat down with lawmakers and transportation officials to find out how the dollars will drive transportation improvements. About a quarter of Louisiana's roads are in poor condition. A recent report card by the American Society of Civil Engineers gives Louisiana a D+ for its rough ride on highways and byways. Bad roads are bad for business, contribute to higher car insurance rates, and pose safety hazards.
One of the main things driving the high cost of automobile insurance is bad roads, also out of your control and my control. So obviously, wanting legislators, elected officials to secure funds to improve roads would go a long way to reducing the costs. I've seen estimates in recent years that suggest, on average, Louisiana families are spending upwards of $600 a year on automobile repairs due to bad roads.
It's a problem decades in the making. So what is the current backlog when we talk about roads and bridges and maintenance?
For the state highway system, it's $18.8 billion.
$18.8 billion.
Correct.
Historically, how did we get to this point with such a backlog?
Well, there's been a chronic underinvestment in transportation for decades. And so when you're underinvesting on an annual basis, the backlog of needs simply grows and grows and grows. So it's not something recent. It's been going on for a long time. And it's reached the point of $18.8 billion. Now, some of that $18.8 billion is the recent inflation. Our construction costs have increased approximately 70% in 2.5 years.
The newsflash here is the federal cash coming to the state to chip away at the burgeoning backlog.
This is a game changer for Louisiana.
U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy helped push the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which will funnel $6 billion for roads and bridges over a 5-year period.
I say for Louisiana, the bipartisan infrastructure bill helps us catch up where we should be in 2023, but it builds our economy for 2050. What do I mean by that? Well, there's billions for coastal restoration, billions for mitigating risk of flooding. There is Louisiana. Now, that's going to be spread across the nation, but Louisiana will get the lion's share of both of those.
On face value, $6 billion for the state's roads and bridges seems like a lot, but let's put it into context.
What's not said in the $6 billion number is that if we simply continued the regular federal transportation program for 5 more years, we would have gotten $4.8 billion anyway. So the net increase for Louisiana is really only about $1.2 billion, which is not a small number by any means. It's a couple $100 million a year, which is great, but it's not $6 billion that people were expecting, $6 billion on top of what we were already getting. And
the state is prioritizing more than 180 transportation projects for federal funding.
Most of that is for bridges, and we scored very well in the federal bridge program, and so we intend to make good use of that money. We've been able to ramp up our what we call our on-system bridge program, which is bridges that are owned by the state, and we've also been able to ramp up our off-system bridge program, which is bridges that are owned by parishes and municipalities.
I could go through a list of the projects. I-49 North in Shreveport, I-49 South in Lafayette, the Calcasieu Ship River Bridge, 6th laning, completing the 6th laning of I-12 through the Florida parishes, road construction for the airport in New Orleans, and addressing the issues of the Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge. By the way, there's also an I-14 interstate highway now authorized in central Louisiana, going east and west, connecting Fort Polk, Alexandria, and other communities with those east and west. That's authorized in this bill as well.
Some federal funding requires matching state funds. Lawmakers have allocated one-time funds from this year's budget surplus for transportation projects.
It's got to be to the tune of about $1 billion because, I mean, when you look at the numbers that we agreed to spend on one-time projects, that's what you're approaching.
You pay at the pumps for roads maintenance, a 20% fuel tax on gasoline and diesel that goes into the State Transportation Trust Fund.
But a lot of people don't realize is all the gas tax goes into a transportation trust fund, and about 2/3 of that pays for the department's salary, benefits, pensions, that type of stuff.
The bipartisan infrastructure law isn't a permanent fix to Louisiana's roadway woes, which begs the question and the quest to find a sustainable source of funds.
And one of the problems we have with hybrid vehicles and now electric vehicles is you're getting less and less from a gas tax. So it's not a ton of money. It's used for some maintenance projects and then certainly to match federal dollars. But we need more to really do the job. And so a couple of years ago, we passed the bill that dedicated some of vehicle sales tax. I think that's a great way to do it.
There's going to have to be something to replace the fuel tax over the long term. And so those are discussions that will have to be had at the state level and at the federal level for that matter. There can be additional sales taxes or what's called a road user charge or a vehicle miles traveled charge.
Ultimately, the road to a smoother ride calls for sustainable funding sources. The bipartisan infrastructure law ignites a larger conversation about how to maximize federal dollars and state dollars to drive road maintenance and improvement, a conversation sure to surface in the next legislative session.
We're digging from a pretty big hole. But the good news is people are starting to see that and are open to doing other things to support construction.
You can check out the list of prioritized transportation projects on the DOTD website. Go to the programs page and click the hyperlink Highway Priority Program. Now, to learn about other infrastructure programs the federal dollars are funding across Louisiana, check out the Building the Bayou State on the web at infrastructure.la.gov.